Welcome to the Potboiler. My name is Patrick Hughes. This is Hollow Grim and Hunt, Kill, Thrive, Part 1. Potboiler is an old term for pulpy paperback genre writing that I think deserves some fresh paint. So I want to use it to tell these stories. Let's do the intro. Nevada, 1897. All Hollow Grim wants out of life is his quiet. He's happiest in the moments of peace he finds in his quiet postal office, sorting the mail for Progress Township. The quiet is stirred from time to time when he's called from his occasional role as a fugitive hunter for the US Marshal. Hollow Grim is a killer. He's the killer that this state needs. He's methodical, precise, and emotionless in his approach to the predators he is tasked to hunt. His effectiveness is sharpened in his complete detachment. He's going to find himself becoming more dangerous as he's going to become emotionally involved in the next hunt put before him. Hollow finds himself captivated by a letter sent to him by the mother of a missing daughter, a woman he once knew as a pleasure girl at Gertrude's hotel. He's well accustomed to accounts of violence and tragedy, but the image of the lost innocent girl stays with him. When he crosses paths with the wrong detail, shared by someone in town with the right opportunity, he sees a thread tying through a series of abductions, thought until then to be a wild, stirring string of gossip. Captivation becomes a warpath for Hollow and the predator at the end of his hunt. The 3 episodes of this story will be offered with no commercial interruptions. Visit patrickhughes.ca for links to me and to my other projects. And please stick around after the story for some light business. Enjoy. All right, let's play the music. Hollow Grim and Hunt, Kill, Thrive. 18 June, 1897. Hollow Grim, it has to be now. Who you really are is best defined in the moments when no one is watching you, in what you pursue when your food and shelter has all been gathered. If we were a well-designed species, the path of all those pursuits would yield peaceful parallel lines. The wrinkle of the human equation is the consequences of all those lines of pursuit constantly intersecting. In Nevada, lines drawn in the desert sand are constantly crossing. Peaceful pursuit is never the natural state. My quiet morning post office sorting was just getting started when Gertrude stormed in through my office doorway. Her gestures were animated in panic. She spoke faster than the thoughts behind her words. She knew what my fleeting quiet moments meant to me. We need you right now. You have to come with me immediately, right now. She failed to inspire the same urgency in me. It can't wait. I waited. Hollow! Gertrude. The newest mess your violent patrons have made will still be there when I'm done here. Clara found a dead body in the big room. There was a murder. It's like a nightmare. I've never seen anything like it. This can't wait. Doc Shillington appeared in the doorway behind her. nodding his head to confirm the gravity of the day. You gave the big room to that merchant from Wisconsin. Yes, Eli Pendleton. Paid in advance. How did you know he was a merchant? Did he gamble? No. Hash and eggs. 2 whiskeys and off to his room alone. A salesman that doesn't stay in the tavern to sell. He was probably on the run. This mess is meant to pollute the evidence. 2 whiskeys sounds like he had a talk. Who did he drink with? Hamish. He cleaned himself up between the coach and the tavern. His luggage was as expensive as his suit. He wasn't accustomed to a one-way trip. Here we go with your details. There's no time for this, boy. I have no time for a pointless exercise. That crime is not how it appears. Your presence has been requested, Hollow. My presence will immediately follow what needs to be done here. My tone was sharp enough to make my priority clear. The role I played in our town of de facto law enforcement was more often than occasionally an irritant for me. Living in my deceased father's shadow came with a burdensome weight. Gertrude knew me well enough to know that disrupting my personal order of operations would only frustrate my focus. Well, fine. She turned and marched out as briskly as she entered. Doc had already left. I should have stopped feeding you years back. Gertrude could clearly see distaste seeping through my expression. The game and the chase had grown stale. The rod of opportunity left to spoil in the sun had made the town around me numb to the repeatedly opened wound of casual violence. The hunt requires a fire that has long gone out in me. I returned to a letter addressed to me that caught my attention in the middle of the stack. Mr. Hollowgrim, Postal Exchange, Progress Township, Nevada. From Mrs. S. Gervins, Postal Office, Box 12, Noble City, Wisconsin. May 5th, 1897. Mr. Grimm, you won't remember me. I once worked for Gertrude as a pleasure girl at the Progress Hotel. We had it better than most, thanks to the fairness Gertrude gave us, as well as you and your father before. I met a young farmhand that had some money saved in his eye on a property and wanted to marry me. I lost him to fever 2 winters back, but he left me with a strong farm and a beautiful daughter. She disappeared on April 30th from the road in front of our house, out to mail a letter for me. This was a place she had no reason to run from. She was taken from me far too soon. She will only soon just past her 11th birthday. My little girl might be gone. She might be in pain. She might one day come home. Until I know what's written after I lost her, whether it's the end or whether it isn't, I will never know another moment of peace. There's no law here that searches for missing children. If it ever happens, it's a private endeavor, a luxury for a mother in agony that means well greater than mine. I need your help to find her. I'm sorry to use your popular name. I have to imagine your father bestowed you with something more traditional. All the best to you and to his memory. Yours truly, Sandra Gervins. You would know me as Precious. I gave my daughter the same name. I folded the letter and slipped it into my waistcoat pocket. I planned to give it my attention as soon as I was able to put my latest local calamity aside. I live in a graveyard called Progress Township, at the center of a yellow field of sand and rock called Nevada. It's a town populated by people seeking their payment for debts that won't be repaid. There doesn't seem to be a soul that stands in my path that isn't living over a line they crossed, walking a road that won't let them turn back. My name is Hollow Grim. I run the postal office of Progress Township, tasked with sorting and stewarding the correspondence that enters this town from somewhere preferable in this world. I'm occasionally a hunter of fugitives, condemned for their crimes and evading capture. I am exceptionally skilled at finding the line linking the crime and the criminal, and tracing that line with a bullet from my rifle, and deadly accurate from a frightening distance. I left my office for the Progress Hotel and Tavern almost an hour later. The affront of being summoned had flattened the motivation that normally drove me through these scenarios. A group of 11 had gathered out front on the boardwalk. All but 2 were normal patrons and employees of Gertrude's. Their eyes all turned and locked on me in unison, waiting on my order to disperse. I nodded at the group with a sour expression. I saw Clara sitting by herself. I would have known her only by the horror still heavy on her. She retracted from the comfort of one of the girls, like the hand on her shoulder burned to the touch. I could sense the scene waiting for me was something extraordinary. I entered the hotel and went right for the stairs up to the rooms. Doc Shillington was waiting for me in the hallway. His eyes were reddened and his posture slouched. He'd clearly been up all night, but seemed energized by the commotion. Well, my boy, glad you could finally make it. I trust you're well rested. Hello, Doc. I bet you are not. My tone bordered on judgmental, but landed between us the way we appreciated. Delightful as always, Hollow. All our fun banter aside, I've never seen anything quite like this. And I was a war doctor stationed in Virginia. Doc's expression was still light, but had a stare indicating a measure of severity. My curiosity began to peak. Gertrude was known to fall prey to melodrama on occasion, but she and Doc had both seen more violence than most, and were both clearly stirred by what they had for me. I've spent days on end sawing off injured limbs, and I didn't make a mess like that. I shot him a sharp glance, as his flippant remark about amputation, given that he performed the one that took my right leg at the knee when I was a young man. He showed a short sting of regret and moved along down the hall. I could only hear the fall of my false right leg as I continued behind him. I slowed my stride somewhat as I reached the hallway, but they hardly did the violence in the room justice. I normally see details immediately. The path behind someone visible in their clothes, their things, and their timing. I was stunned by the explosion of red, despite their warning, and somehow the details were all buried in blood. Mr. Pendleton had met his end in terror and pain that I hadn't seen in battle, homicide, or execution. Room 106 was the hotel's formal suite, such as it was. Gertrude kept it for her more esteemed guest, far fewer and farther between in recent years. The finer details that once graced the room were and gilded the edges, the extra linens and lace, the fruit and soaps, were now rare offerings, but the larger ornate furniture was still present. The wearied formal setting provided a dramatic contrast on every surface. As my first survey around the room concluded, it struck me as an intentional feature to spray blood over every corner of this room. Pendleton was on the bed, positioned like he was in a coffin, only soaked in blood and covered in lacerations. I won't be able to rent this room for a month. You haven't used it in well over 4, Gertrude. It looks better if you ask me. How dare you, you disrespectful old drunkard. He came in on the last coach. Yes, Freddie's only fare. He was so pleased. They shared a common chuckle, meant to lovingly ridicule Gertrude's coachman. Nothing seemed to thrill him more than coming back from the evening train with one passenger, enough to make him and his last ride worthwhile and hopefully offer a nice conversation. His piece, for lack of a better term. And he signed in as Pendleton? Any idea if it's his real name? He had a banknote and a letter from a lawyer in his billfold with the same name, used for his identification. Seemed real enough to me. He might be on the run, but it seems like he got a little too to hide. He opened his suit fold on his own and hung his clothes in his wardrobe cupboard. Solid point, Doc. Every piece of furniture is in its normal position. I tipped one of the chairs to show the bloodstains where the feet were on the rug. He must have been hidden, got his throat slit before Pendleton could resist. Not that he looks very formidable. The killer kept his shoes aside as not to leave a trail. That is a long walk into insane if it's true, son. It depends on what you need to display. His wide expression indicates his throat was slit early in the struggle, and he could feel his lungs filling with blood. But the bed isn't nearly as soiled as it should be. The spray is biggest and the pools are largest by the window. The brighter blood looks arterial, but the smears over there are more venal. The handprints also look too small to be his. Multiple cuts were meant to bleed out the smeared demonstration blood after he weakened, but before he was drained. You are describing a scripted level of carnage. He was placed on the bed. That was very deliberate and important to the killer. It's a picture he wanted to paint. Pendleton was not a small man. I don't know if I could lift his dead weight. Me neither. Just you then, madam. Gertrude jabbed her elbow into Doc's ribs in reaction to his comment. Alone on the last coach may mean the killer was likely knew he was coming and got ahead of him on the train, waiting for him here. This is true. My boy, the only obvious reason to escape west through Nevada is leaving Chicago for California. This man's age, it's to hide money you're left with, to hide from your family. To do that, you go to New York. Hide from authorities, you go north to Canada. Hide from the men you stole from, launder your accounts in the world's fastest growing economy. Well, that makes fine sense, but why the show? Why paint my room in blood? A bad reason. Or a worse reason. Go ahead. His killer's handlers wanted to make a point, to go back to the strength of their authority. That would be the bad reason. That would mean we're not likely to see more until the next vendetta. What's worse than that? It's worse if no one asked for this. This could just be an animal at play. An edge of my words caught Gertrude's emotions. A string she didn't expect to strum. She hid a tear with a gasp and a quick move of her hand to her face. A hired killer has motives and opportunities. A wolf follows its food, weather, and terrain. This is an unnatural carnage, put on display. I don't know how to hunt a predator like that. We stood there for a second, lost for words. We'd all seen so much meaningless violence, but could always point to anger or greed or jealousy. It was hard to think there was a worse option. Freddie came up the stairs with a gurney he had fetched from Doc's office. "I'm done if you are, kid," Doc said with a nod. "I'll write something to satisfy the magistrate. You can take him, Freddie. Mind your feet near the puddles, Freddie." Gertrude always used the same childish tone with him. It seemed unbearable. "What do we do about this, young man?" "Do?" "Yes, damn it, do. Something has to be done. Justice, righteousness, violence for violence, whatever it is you and this sot, your good father before you, have always seemed fit to unleash in my place of business." There wasn't much of a trail left behind. I've got nowhere to set my aim. The orchestration I see here tells me some of the why, but I would need to learn more about this Mr. Pendleton to close in on the who and the where. You say that like you aren't going to. I don't feel compelled to take this further. My sense of this is that behind this ugliness, this man's lying in the bed he made. Gertrude turned from me and stormed back to the stairs before I could finish my sentence. Doc eased the door shut and wrinkled his brow like he had something to say. "Do you disagree?" "I've seen every kind of killing one man can put another through. This just doesn't seem worth it, without a master plan of some sort." The devil had his hand in this. Isn't that enough? No, it's not. The devil opposes good. A predator is compelled to kill. This is a disdain for life that has no purpose. Their emotions were clouding my direction. I spoke softly to keep it close to ending. There is always a purpose. Angry, desperate, or craven, there is always a line. I know you see the details in every hunt. And that's how you hunt hunters as well as you do. You see a spider's web of connections in this room that won't even occur to me. And I'm a pretty smart fellow. I don't see a professional killing here, or a message. I see a craving I can't understand. I see a monster at play. He continued to the stairs, talking to me over his shoulder. You are a monster killer. Always denying it until you don't. If I killed every monster, there'd be no one left to join your poker table. Every monster would include both of us, Hollow. If that day comes, a world free of monsters, you know you'd have far less fun than me. Every skillful murder should be considered a threat, but not every threat gets a federal rifle for hire. I think my focus should remain on more imminent issues. You have no heart, Hollow Grim. Everyone wears sheep's clothing. We all put on a uniform that we believe the people in the flock around us want to see, so that something we've got can stay hidden. Everyone in Progress hides a savage under their domesticated disguise. Some hide a scavenger, others a prowler, and still others a predator. My father could see the animal under the human immediately and knew how to measure their portrayal. Some predators are prey to their compulsion. Some thieves have to take things they don't need. Some men have to hunt women that want to be courted. Some wolves are rabid and no longer stay with the pack. I excel at the convergence of skills needed to kill condemned felons. I've called myself a killer. I've known many that have, both for the good and bad, wherever that line lies. I know of none honestly satiated when they were the one left standing. It's never an outcome that strikes your eyes as natural. No matter the costume, there are human instincts that remind us we're all cut from similar cloth. We collectively want our flock to remain. There was no person in Progress Township that cast a more domesticated demeanor than Hamish Rutherford. Hamish was the apprentice running the humble town paper's printing press, doing odd jobs and working hard like everyone else in this town, just getting by. He set and fixed the clocks. He had a talent for tuning the organ in the chapel, the piano in Gertrude's tavern, and every other mechanical device in town. He was dutiful and modest. In the rare moment between his tasks, he put aside a reasonable allotment of time for his own endeavors. Quiet and modestly kept, and he went about it skillfully like a master of his craft. He did so without boasting or burdening his neighbors and his coworkers. It's not altogether difficult to portray yourself as a respectable member of the community in northeastern Nevada. Pay your own way, smile at Sunday service, keep your waistcoat buttoned, and folks should have little ill to say as you pass, beyond a suspicious sneer. In a town that seemed to import a new trouble every week, Hamish was social enough to be politely appreciated and not too notable to ever be a concern. Polite conversation occasionally mandates a contribution. In open air, a topical discussion can be designed to draw an opinion from a passerby as comments float about to build a rumor into a fascination. It had been since late in the spring that people first started talking about the rumors of children going missing along the corridor of the Union Pacific that passed north of Progress Township. But in recent days, the story had really gathered steam. I could see 3 older members of the ladies' church group fluttering through their exchange of gossip, hoping to latch on to anyone in the know. Hamish and I, objectively the 2 most informed people in town, and both known misanthropes, approached them on the boardwalk from opposing directions. I deliberately veered far to my right, shamelessly flaunting the limp on my false right leg, making my lack of maneuverability clear. Trapped between unpleasant obligations, he caught the eye of one of the ladies and her swirl of controversy. "Young Mr. Rutherford, what is your opinion on the authorities and their abysmal reaction to these poor missing children?" "Why, yes, Myrtle, I hope the eventual answer isn't like every other in this lawless state. Put a killer and a rifle on it." Mildred Weston voiced that one directly at me. I could see that Hamish wanted nothing less than to engage, but in the uncomfortable instant recognized that the bulk of his newspaper's paltry funding came from the backers of the ladies' organization. He started with a thoughtful nod as he put together a knowledgeable response that would offer a quick exit. I slowed somewhat, cruelly interested in his squirming. "Yes, I can say for sure that the law won't much help, if they can't move any quicker. Sure is a sad story to hear. That last one we put in the paper, I hope they find her. Myrtle, you're such a soft heart. Mark my words, these stories are flights of whimsy. The young ones will have their runaway fun and come home by this time next week." "I'm sure you're right, Elizabeth. The young ones these days." Hamish retreated as he felt his polite dismissal permitted. I did my best to appear I hadn't paid attention. He said her. There was every possible likelihood that the story sent to the newspaper over the telegram wire mentioned a name or a gender. Maybe he made his own fair assumption. I can't say for certain why, but the response struck a note that stung my ear. It stayed with me. I am not normally one for conversation. I avoid as much of it as I can in my postal office, which most have become accustomed to, and tolerate the banter Doc starts between us at the bar rail. I find nothing but discomfort in the meaningless exchanges people have about days that go nowhere. Hamish was similar. He had a stammer that stumbled him and often forced a repeat of his closing syllables, but it was common to most and was paid little mind. In our occasional encounters, we sensed that the instinct in each other that little needed to be said. When I'd see him converse on the street, there was always an essential difference between us. He had a display of etiquette for the person he was speaking with, a practiced, pleasant expression that would fall away as he turned. I tend to skip the smile altogether. There's always a capacity in me to be cold. Many times been measured with a lack of humanity, often understandably so. It's who I am. for better and worse, with little to hide. My sheep's clothing barely hides me. His disguise was much more carefully maintained. Hamish and I shared the comfort found in the rigidity of routine. He came to my postal office every day at 3:45 p.m. to deliver the afternoon edition of the tiny Progress Bulletin newspaper and gather his correspondence. On a particular day some weeks back, the third in a row, he seemed more concerned with the post than normal. Fingering his way through a stack I had partially completed sorting that he could see included his letters. The standard correspondence was obvious, and another he quickly found near the back. I approached to assist him as he found that last envelope. It struck me as odd how he chose it, only able to see the return address on the envelope's top corner, while his own name and address was still hidden behind the envelopes in front. The return address stayed with me. Insignificantly nowhere in Wisconsin to most, but then the first significant moment I had seen cross Hamish's normally quiet expression. He was eager for that letter. I had watched Hamish with some fascination long before any suspicion of what would form or rise in him, give me a sense of his motivation, and confirm the thresholds I saw that were dissimilar to mine. I tend to seek a sense like that of everyone around me, where they're likely to go when they get desperate or angry, or when they seek a quiet moment. Doc does the same thing across a poker table. When I received the letter from the distraught mother, one of Gertrude's former pleasure girls, with a familiar return address from the same small town, my attention was hooked. Then he said her. The line to him was drawn in ink 10 days later. I happened to have neglected to read my 2 recent issues of the Progress Bulletin, which were still sitting on the corner of my desk. As the Wednesday edition was delivered on schedule, adding to the pile in front of me, I noticed a pattern in the printed lettering. I can't help but note the capital R in your headline size plate seems to have a flaw. I knew the statement would get his attention. I see the same line in the 3 issues in front of me. You're right about the flaw. I have a new printing plates coming. I only just recently got a set from my supplier in Wisconsin. They are sending a replacement for the defect. I'll have them in the press for tomorrow's edition. My question was as close to playful as I could produce, to not seem suspicious. He answered curtly, like my comment was itself an accusation, more related to performance than anything nefarious. Wisconsin is nice this time of year. You're fortunate to see that travel to find that opportunity. I had his opportunity, connecting him with an innocent young victim. I was expected, as a contracted agent of the US Marshal's office, to close the case before I drew the line from the end of my rifle to the edge of his skull. Hamish Rutherford was my prime suspect in the disappearance of a 10-year-old girl that had likely never seen a threatening glare before the day she met him. She was forming in my mind as a figure of innocence, perhaps the rarest of commodities in this part of the world. I couldn't shake my discomfort with the way innocence was taken from her. It would invade my thoughts, the moment I found any rest. Even if she was alive somewhere, that loss was worth killing for. I couldn't hold comfortably from my head an echo of the way she must have screamed for her mother when she wondered where any good things had gone. The line I was drawing to Hamish was also forming a thread that passed through several other similar stories of children going missing that had recently made the grade of tavern tales and street rumors, but not the attention of the proper authorities. I was at the Progress Bulletin office again the following morning. There was an hour every morning when the copy was written that the staff was out while Hamish set the plates on the printing press. I found him sitting quietly in front of the large machine. He seemed put off but unthreatened by my presence. "Good morning, Mr. Grimm. Can I help you? You and I have to talk, Hamish." "Is it about the scene at the hotel? Another article is going out today." "It's about another, because Judge Jameson was uncertain if there would be a writ of foul play. I'm happy to share the details." "It's really just the one thing." I knew Hamish was alluding to the statement about law enforcement's response. "The details are everything. I know you agree." I rolled past his apparent confusion. Eli Pendleton, a textile merchant with the Madison Mercantile Company, came to town on Freddie's last coach. He had a drink with you at the bar, retired to Gertrude's only suite, and was brutally murdered before he could change into his nightshirt. His blood was emptied from his body through multiple lacerations, painting an illustration across that room of a violent disdain for his existence. Nothing was stolen. Some strangers bring problems here with them, but I expect none of that was news to you. He turned to me slowly, without any discernible physical reaction. His eyes were flat and disinterested, looking through me. A silence hung between us as he let the space for his response stay open. We had 2 drinks. "I have something else to discuss. I have to know about Wisconsin and a young girl named Precious." "What is it you have to know? He turned back to his press in a gesture of disinterest. "I have to know if the story of her killer is going to end with a rope or a bullet. And why would that knowledge pertain to me? Between men like us, it only made sense to stay direct and simple. I can connect you to the town she's from by correspondence and a recent trip to that area. I know you took her. You're saying that I was verifiably in this girl's hometown when she went missing? When was that?" "The last week of April. On your trip to get new plates." "It wasn't the correct week. Precious was last seen the week before." Again, there was no reaction. He was meant to correct my data and show himself. Another silent space went by. He resisted my bait. "I'm certain you've considered this, but for the entire second half of April, we did 2 editions per day. He cleaned the ink he could from his hands and turned from his work back to me. It is verifiable by my coworkers and the readers of the bulletin, like yourself, Mr. Grimm, by the production of this paper, that I had to have been working here on the dates you claim I was in Wisconsin. His tone had switched to pleasant, almost excessively so. That is, until my recent trip for new plates on the 27th. It was my turn to allow the space to hang silent between us. I waited a moment, certain another line was coming. Do you have a motive to accompany your opportunity? No one has a motive to kill an innocent girl. I can only imagine your path being cut and craving or compulsion. I don't want to know how you came to this, Hamish. Which means you don't. Which means you can prove nothing that you are insinuating. Which is why my attorney, Mr. Mendelson, has drafted a letter of affidavit signed by my coworkers confirming my location for the whole month of April up to the 27th. They each have letters to match. Do you think it's wise to put your defense ahead of an accusation? It's not illegal. It's in fact prudent. In a town where the closest thing we have to the law is the son of a bad killer that wields his last name and an occasional federal bounty hunter status like a device of moral reckoning, utterly free of due process. It was by far the most I'd ever heard him talk. His words were prepared along with his actions, like he was reading from notes. His voice was almost speaking to the beats of sentences that were irritating my ears, like they were from the script of a play. My role in the justice system is normally somewhat outside of that process. Do you have this letter accessible, or shall I contact Mendelson? I know him well. Your personal rapport helped him craft the perfect letter. I wasn't aware I had offended him to such a degree. You don't have to see it that way. It's not personal. The threat you present is objectively real. Yes, it is. I would urge you to consider the fact that the missing girl is still just missing. Perhaps she's moved on to Oregon or California. Your work is in documents of black and white. Can you have a murder without a body? Again, we had silence. I did my best to learn from the moment and see what he did with the knight I pushed across the board. I can see how much this means to you. He was authentic, but cold the way I would be. There was a tiny light in his expression that flickered after a moment. He knew he was winning. I sensed he was suppressing his version of a thrill. Getting this wrong can't be easy for you. I know it isn't a common experience, but I can assure you that your assumptions are easily unraveled. They would be indefensible in any court. I know you've sat in many. The moment ossified between us. It seemed unavoidable that acting now would back me into the corners Hamish had built. I underestimated his sense of structure. I nodded my head. This can happen another day. I left his office to a polite salutation. It was completely out of my character to go at Hamish eye to eye. I didn't have the line I needed to set my shot. I felt compelled to skip the hunt and see my accusation reflected in his eyes. I never put the kill before the hunt. I growled the phrase to myself over and over for my angry walk back, and I was never one to talk to myself. Never put the kill before the hunt. I found myself staring at Precious's letter every time my hands weren't occupied. I stayed on every word. I went back and forth across every space between the typeface. I could only think of monsters. To be continued in part 2. Thanks so much for listening to Hollow Grim and Hunt, Kill, Thrive, part 1. Part 2 should be available in the feed. In part 2 of 3, Hollow confronts his only suspect in a series of child abductions, but it doesn't unfold as planned. Still wrestling with a minor obsession, he decides to shift to a more direct approach. Let's do the call to action. If you like this story so far and you want more, or you feel compelled to throw your support in this direction, the fastest route is through my website, patrickhughes.ca. There you'll find access to my other projects, links to my books and ebooks on various platforms, and a contact me function. There'll be a link in the comments for this podcast. In the meantime, you can rate, review, comment, and subscribe. Share on your socials and recommend the Potboiler and all my writing to all your friends. Good fiction is where you find it, and hopefully you find that through your friends' great taste. Thanks again for listening. Talk to you soon.